to the Produce on Purpose podcast. This is Randy Adkins, your host. We are always looking to experience life as being the real you. Today, we have a wonderful guest, and she's going to bring her talents and have a great conversation about ways of really bringing in two different kinds of ways of thinking. So, over 25 years, we have Victoria, who has had an intersection of academia and executive leadership. She's dedicated her career to mastering the art of work-life harmony, and a theme that resonates deeply with her is in today's high-pressure environments. So, Victoria, welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, and how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Really happy to be here.
So we'll jump right in and just start, and really want you to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Well, as you mentioned, I have over 25 years of experience in corporate world. So I spent most of my career in Silicon Valley in different roles in different companies. I worked in large global corporations. I worked in startups. I worked in boutique consulting companies, always around technology and innovation. But I started as a psychologist, actually. So right off of high school, I really wanted to be a psychologist. So I went and got a degree. I got a master's degree, and then I got a PhD in psychology. And then I started counseling, right? So I started working as a psychologist. And about a year in to that career, I suddenly realized that, no, that's not it. I made a mistake. So I followed my passion, and I made a mistake. For sure, it was the wrong field that I went to. So I pivoted into the corporate world, and a few years in, what do you think happened? I said, wow, I made another mistake. That's not it either. So I pivoted again and again and again until I realized that it's actually not the job. It's not really a corporation or a small startup or a big startup or a company. It was really that what we call a burnout now. So this is like a classic case of a burnout that made me make all those switches and solve the problem that wasn't really a problem. So now it's really a passion project of mine to help others to go through burnout and make kind of controlled and aware choices of how to prevent this, so that they don't just switch external circumstances, but they find something inside of themselves that they can really lean on and rely on to figure out what is that they need to change to make their lives better.
Well, and that's really awesome, because I know even with the pandemic, it was a very big discussion talking about, burnout and making sure, especially for the first responders that were around. But, we know that it's not just during the pandemic that we have this issue of burnout that's occurring. And so I think it's great that you're able to begin to share that. And sounds like your journey has been an interesting one, which I want to kind of start with. And so I didn't say your whole name initially. I think I was like, oh, wait a minute, Victoria Mensch is here with us, and I appreciate her coming on. So the idea that you started off and you started with psychology and ended up in the corporate world, just take a little time here and tell about that, kind of what that feeling was when you started that process. Because sometimes we do start, and this is something I share with many over and over again, is that sometimes we'll start things and we'll find out exactly what we don't like, and more so than maybe what we do like yet. But trying different things, how was that particular journey? And I know if you can tell a little bit of how you felt, and then, we know that now you've gotten to a place where it sounds like you found your calling and your passion.
Yeah, so what's interesting about burnout, and I think that a lot of people experience it differently, but there's a common thread in the burnout, and that's a feeling of exhaustion. Right? It's almost like a chronic exhaustion. So no matter what you do, no matter how much sleep you get, you really feel tired, right? So hence the burnout. They're kind of burning the batteries, right? So you're running on empty batteries. That's what it is. For me, when I started and working with people in psychology, I just quickly really got tired. It's like I cannot take one more sad story, and I'm very straightforward about this because the message that I do want to bring now that I am working with people again, in kind of similar capacity, I know that it was not about people. It was really about me not shielding myself, not having tools to replenish my energy. So it's very interesting that you mentioned first responders during pandemic. In general, people in service profession, they kind of feel it much faster. I think the burnout itself, the concept of burnout was really born out of the research done on medical professionals, people who worked in emergency rooms. And I think a lot of it is really because you're giving away so much, right? So you cannot say that people did not follow their passion. A lot of people in medical professions, they do follow their passion. They want to help, right? They want to save lives.
Hmm.
I was driven by similar kind of motives as well. I really wanted to help others. But it's important to have the tools to replenish that energy as well. So it's not a one-way street. You just give, but you actually are being able to construct your day, your life, your attitude, right? So your actions around things that replenish your energy as well. So that's kind of what I figured out later in life. But at that time, I thought I just don't want to work with people one-on-one. I want to have something a little bit more neutral. And I just looked at what skills I have that are transferable to the corporate world. And I realized that research was one of those skills. So I actually went to in marketing, doing marketing research, and
Hmm.
also being able to understand what people are looking for, what their interests are, and how they perceive the messages. So that's also I found as a transferable skill in marketing as well.
That's interesting because sometimes we end up with different skill sets that we learn in different places and trying to align those to kind of help out with the process. One of the things that just stood out to me as you were talking was that burnout, it wasn't exactly sometimes something external to you. So it wasn't the people, but you found that sometimes burnout is more than that. And it also sounds like it could be related to, sometimes it may be something that we're doing physically all the time. There's exhaustion there. Are there multiple levels of burnout that you could end up with? And what would you describe those as so that when I think one of the first steps would probably be to identify, are
Mm.
you in a place of burnout? What does that look like?
Yes. So a burnout is kind of how do I say it? It's a kind of a heavy state, right? So you exhaustion is one of those. I think that's a red thread that goes through um, kind of recollections of people who can identify burnout in themselves. But what burnout is a chronic stress reaction. So how you personally react to stress, that's how the burnout is going to manifest. So sometimes it could be changes in behavior like digestion, for example. Like if you lose appetite when you're stressed, that's probably going to be something that you want to look for to figure out whether in burnout or not. Or if you start craving things, or if you lose sleep, there's some, sleep interaction, sleep pattern disruptions. And then that could, burnout could manifest that way as well. On a kind of psychological level, you feel tired and you feel unmotivated. You feel skeptical, right? So you don't want to go and do the work so there is a little bit of lethargy there, lack of energy, and things like that. But it's individual. So from person to person, what your reaction to stress is probably these symptoms will actually, kind of increase during the burnout. There are tests out there that people can do. So some of them are pretty elaborate. All
Okay.
of them are free, as far as I know. So you go into the checklist, but it's not even that important to say, oh, I'm in burnout or I'm not in burnout.
Okay.
There is a stage where also, what was very interesting to know, there is another stage, and I think many more people kind of fall into that category. It's called languishing. So, and it's, so you're not
Languishing.
quite,
Okay.
yeah, so you're not quite like happy, right? But you're not quite happy. So you're neither there, neither here nor there. You're somewhere in between. And when somebody asks you, like, how are you doing? How's life? And you go like, meh, different day, same thing. So I
Right.
think a lot of us would actually fall into this category. And I think the irony of kind of being in this category is that when you're in this state, you kind of think that this is normal. Well, this is what adult life is, right? So
Mm.
this is it. It's not going to get better. It's not going to get worse. So you're not even looking for help. You're not even trying to change things. So I think that kind of the irony of this category, and a lot more people fall into that. And there is the state of flourishing, and that we forgot about, and a lot of people don't even put it as a goal for themselves. Like
Right.
I'm fine, I'm okay. It's like, yeah, but I'm okay. But there's a state of flourishing when you're actually when you when life is juicy, right? When the colors are bright, when you're motivated, when you wake up in the morning, you're motivated, you're excited, right? So you're vibrant. There's vitality to that. And I think that kind of one of the missions that I put on myself is that we put the bar there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is our baseline. Should be our baseline. We shouldn't settle for languishing. Certainly get out of burnout, get help, get out of burnout, but don't settle for languishing. Really kind of raise the bar to yourself. There's no reason for us to not be in that flourishing state.
So it sounds like there is, the particular areas you could be in a burnout kind of situation. You could be languishing. You could be in a place where there's flourishing, and you're saying flourishing should be the floor, and then there's more. So I love that. I love the idea that every day you should wake up with this excitement. Many years ago, I had this eye surgery where I could see better, and they did that. And when I woke up the next morning, it was very vibrant. You talked about vibrancy, you talked about the color. I could see colors. It was extremely a different life. I was like, wow, I didn't know the world was could be like this. And so now I'm going to now know that, hey, I can look and see things in a particularly new way. So as we are kind of going through, and if you don't identify, but if you're kind of going through a daily basis and your floor is not the flourishing, so that means there's obviously more to life. What are some of the particular tips, first aid tips, whatever you would call them, that you could start working towards helping to get out of a situation where you're probably at burnout or languishing, and maybe even where you're at flourishing, where you can kind of uplift yourself and get to a better place?
Right, right. So when I talk about burnout, I really like to talk about two levels of
Yep.
tools. And the first one, as you mentioned, is first aid, and it's really related to stress management. So we live in the world, we know, I know, everyone knows, right? That there's so many disruptions. There's so much stress. We stress about everything, about real things and unreal things and imaginary things, just everything, to the point that everything that comes at us causes stress. And there is a reason for that. There's lots of disruption, and the pace of life is accelerating. There's the technological disruptions. I've been in high tech for and innovation for a long time. We're talking about disruptive technologies and disrupting yourself. So there are lots of disruptions, climate disruptions. Who knows? The heavy rain started. So many different things. Could be political disruptions. The disruptions are not going to go away. So those
Hmm.
external circumstances are going to happen. We don't know what the certainty is not going away. So what we can master is our own state. And stress management is this first kind of first aid, first response stress management tools. How do we take control over our own nervous system, right? So that we're not in this constant survival mode, but we can shift from survival mode to a rest and digest mode. And those stress management tools is really the language how we can talk to our survival system. It doesn't understand words. It's just too old for verbal understanding and
Hmm.
communication. So it understands the language of breathing, right? So when
Okay.
we have breathing techniques, and there are very various tools, lots of them out there for breathing. Some of them are very basic. You inhale for 5 counts, you hold your breath for 5 counts, you exhale for 5 counts, and you hold your breath for 5 counts, and you do it 5 to 7 times. It's going to take you a couple of minutes, and it immediately elevates that that state of anxiety or frustration or anger and what have you. That the stress management technique, it sends the signal in the language that our survival system understands, sends the signals to calm down. The danger has passed. We can move on with our lives. So breathing is one of those languages. Action, movement is another of those languages. It
Hmm.
does not have to be, that you need to run a marathon. No, it can be light stretching. It could be you clench and you relax your muscles. That sends a signal to the survival brain to come down, to switch. The visualization images is the language that brain understands as well. So a few minutes of guided meditation maybe, or visualization of calm motion, and so there's so many of them out there. Just go on YouTube, type it out, guided meditation, pick the one that works for you. These are the tools that should be at our disposal at any time. So when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel anxious, when the anger comes up, when the frustration comes up, it should be at your disposal. You understand that that's the time to take a few minutes and breathe or move or meditate. So that's the first aid, right? So it's really just to talk to your physiology. And then we're talking about the second level. And second level is something that can bring more sustainable results, and how I actually regulate my mindset. And that's intentional. These are things. This is a practice. This is not
Hmm.
one off, but it's a practice. It practically, you make a decision that you live the life you want. You make a decision to be happy. It's a practice. It's not the end goal. It's really a journey there. And one of the first steps that I really like to talk about is how you bring back joy into your life. How do you carve out space in your life to bring in the things that you enjoy just for the
Hmm.
sake of it? Not because somebody asked you to do things, not because it's useful, not because it brings you money, not because of the return on investment.
Right.
No, you actually do something just for the sake of being happy. And we're not talking about big things. So now I'm going to 6 weeks vacation, or a cruise or something, where I'm going for a 4 hours massage or something. No, these are little things that you build into your schedule every day. It could be I go outside for a couple of minutes and I want to feel the sun on my skin, right?
Hmm.
And I do it because it brings me joy and happiness. And obviously, it's very individual, but you do that and you put them in the calendar and you do them intentionally. And that's how you start replenishing your energy. So you make a decision to bring joy into your life, and you make that conscious decision that this is as important as everything else. It's as important. The joy is as important as the usefulness. The joy is as important as health. And the joy is as important as the relationship, whatever that is. And that what brings you energy, that what makes you replenish that energy that you spend giving others.
That's really awesome because the first level, it sounds like it is primarily physiology. I've heard similar. I guess it was really what you explained was box breathing. Uh, it's acute. I have something going on. I need a first responder. Like if something happens, I call 911. We want this immediate kind of relief from the stress that we have. And so you do those types of things, or movement, or some type of meditation that you can kind of get yourself back to that state. Sounds like level one is there. And level two, which is interests me because I really do believe part of what we should do every day is should have joy. How do you bring joy? It doesn't have to only be something where you're doing something big, but you talked about you doing small things that kind of gets you in a state that you enjoy and that you're happy with. And I believe that if we can do those things, and it sounds like if we can put it into our schedule, and you use the word that I love, intentionally, that you have put in yourself, say, I'm going to have joy and I'm going to take on the tools from level one or whatever, whenever I'm in a state of stress and I'm feeling exhausted, I'm feeling in a space where, things aren't going quite the way that I need them to be. So as we are making these choices and intentionally making these types of decisions, how do you get to a point where you know that this is no longer just an acute thing that maybe I'm dealing with? If, for example, you got to a place where you knew you needed to move to different jobs, or maybe I need to change my situation. How do you begin to distinguish between when is it just me doing the work and I've done some work, but maybe I do need to begin to change maybe the job I'm at or some of the external situations that I'm dealing with?
Yes, it's very interesting. And again, it differs from person to person. All I want to say is that a lot of people that I talk to, by the time they find me, they are ready to quit, right? So this is our first response almost. Like for sure, for me, it was for me. For sure, it was psychology, this counseling that I made a mistake with. For sure, I worked after that. I worked in a semiconductor company doing marketing. For sure, it's a semiconductor thing. That's so impersonal, that's so convoluted, so far away from kind of real needs of real people. For sure, it's that made me unhappy, right? It could be in a relationship situation. For sure, it's this person makes me unhappy. For sure, if I change that, then everything else changes. So, in most cases, more often than not, yes, you can change the external circumstances, but guess what's going to happen? You take yourself with you. So you're going to repeat the circumstances. Like you're going to get rid of this person, you get in different relationship, and you run to the same thing because you took yourself with you. You cannot run away from yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important, I think, to really distinguish this thing. So let's go through the practice. Let's get ourselves from a survival mode. Let's put the
Yes.
self-care into our schedule so we actually experience that joy. We prioritize that joy. We prioritize ourselves. We make a
Mm-hmm.
decision to make ourselves happy. Let's get the practice of gratitude when you actually notice things that you like instead of
Yes.
things you don't like. So that's what practice of gratitude is. Um, right? So like I intentionally notice things that I like instead of things I don't like.
Right.
Let's look at what it is in your day that brings energy to you and what it is in your day that drains energy. And
Mm.
you put this as a list. Well, these are the things that I really like, I enjoy. They bring energy to me. And
Yes.
these are the things that really drain my energy. So one of the examples from my personal experience could be that in a day, I had to do all these things. Some of those were very creative, some of those were related to talking to people, some of those were really mundane when I had to fill out spreadsheets. And I realized that out of all this, spreadsheets was the really joy killer for me. So, and then you say, well, what do I want to see more of? Right? So, and
Right.
you start creating that vision for yourself, and then you start negotiating for that. Where is it that I bring value?
Mm-hmm.
What's my contribution and the value, and how I bring that value? A lot of us in our busy jobs and our corporate work, or as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we substitute value for time that we spend on things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and that's a sure road to burnout because there's not enough hours in the day. So where is that value that you contribute? You realize that and you do more of that. And slowly but surely you peel away those things that drain your energy, those things that don't bring value, and you learn to say no to those. And in most cases, let me tell you, it's not the job. People who achieve a certain level of success, if they're in
Hmm.
executive capacity, they didn't get there if they did not really like their job. Most of the time, they do like their job. It's really everything else that layered on top of that that needs to be cleared so they actually become more productive and motivated again. Because now they have that harmony. They are in a driver's seat. They decide how much of this is job, how much of this is relationship. They have life
Right.
outside of job. It's not just, 100% identity around your job. They have life outside of that, and they um, can in every day they can decide for themselves. They can control when they can put more effort in the job, more effort in the relationship, and everything is just working in harmony. Does that answer your question, Randy?
Oh, you answered the question. I believe that a lot of times the question, and the reason I asked that question is because we sometimes think it's where we are at the moment. We sometimes think it's the external circumstances, but it sounds like you're saying, regardless of if you change your environment, you may have some temporary relief, but in the end, you're still bringing yourself. And so if there's items that you haven't worked on, you haven't dealt with, you will end up in a depleted situation once again. And additionally, I like how you talked about the energy that we end up having, that we should think about what gives me energy and what drains my energy. And you said that we should say no to the things that drain our energy. Now, that seems to be sometimes difficult for people to identify those energy draining areas. Sometimes those energy draining areas could be family, could be other relationships, could be, things that we have been dealing with that don't make us feel the best. How do you begin? And I know they usually call these boundaries how do you begin to say no in those situations? Is it something that you are um, following because now you are having intention about it? Are you more aware of it? Kind of how do you get to that space where you can start to put up those boundaries?
Yes, and it's not that easy for a lot of people to say no. So let me answer this in two parts. The first part, I just want to go back to that conversation of value, right? So what is it, the value that you contribute? What is the value that you create by performing this particular task? And it's especially important in job situation. But in the family situation, it's the same. For example, I have kids, right? So where do I create the greatest value for them? When I do laundry, when I clean the kitchen, or when I spend time to them reading books or discussing, I don't know, the wonders of the world, right? So
Right.
where is that value that I create that nobody else can replicate? So that's one discussion. The second discussion is that um, is this really my business? So if I look at all the things that need to be done and how they need to be done, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to understand, is this really my business? How they need to be done? A lot of times, when we're talking about boundaries, we really are talking about control. We want to control everything and everyone, that everything needs to be done the way I see it, the way I think about it, the way I would do it. So that's control. 90% of that is unnecessary control. So learning to relinquish that control, that's the skill. And let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you, where is that control is coming from? It's coming from fear. So that
Ah,
fear, exactly, that fear that I'm losing something, that the results are not going to be the same, whatever that is. So it's a good question to say, is this going to be important 5 years from now? How exactly I put that clothes into laundry Is it going to be important 5 years from now? No, because in the when people come to me, they come as a whole person, not just as a job, but as a whole person. And then their complaints start. Oh, only I can do laundry. Nobody can do laundry like I can do laundry. It's seriously,
Yes.
people who spend 90% of their time in jobs, managing tens, hundreds, thousands of people. And then she comes home, it's like, only I can do laundry this way. Really? But it's really a fear, right? So the fear that runs that something can go wrong. So realizing that fear and
Hmm.
understanding, is this really my business? Is this person put a spreadsheet in a different way than I did this? Is this fear real? Is this really my business? And
Right.
a lot of times it's not my business. So the skill is to let it go. And when you let it go and it feels like, "Hmm," then it wasn't unnecessary control.
Is this my business? That's what we need to be asking way more of.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
this my business?
yeah.
It sounds like if in those situations and like you're talking about, something mundane like laundry or washing the dishes, that sometimes we use that as I think as a crutch or a comfort zone to get into that, does it matter how it's done? If it gets done or
Mhm,
the particular result is there, or is this even if it's not done my way, did it still get done? And when you let go, like you say, it sounds like there's a modicum of a release that we can all have if we learn to find those areas and ask ourselves that question: is this my business? And then be in a space where you can kind of release that control, because is am I having fear about something here of losing something? And sometimes it may be, I guess, maybe control in other areas of your life that you
mhm.
may not have control over here, but I sure do have control over this laundry or the spreadsheet or
Yeah,
the
right,
dishes, which
right.
you would say is pretty mundane, right?
Right, exactly. Well, it's especially, business owners, people who like very strong people, right? So they see how their business should work. So they
Right.
understand how it should work. They know how they would do it. So it's very difficult for them to let go if somebody, but at some point for growth, you really need to bring other people. And you should be open and able to receive that support from others as well. If you're not able to receive that support, you really cannot grow because there is a limit to what you can do and how you can do this. So in the work situation, it's the same way, right? And once you actually in that state, you're going to attract the much more capable people who are willing to help, so are able to help and to
Hmm.
grow and evolve with you and grow your business with you as well.
I think that's key is when you are moving to that space, especially when you're in a transition of, but especially if you're in a startup and you're doing like multiple different positions, different jobs, and then you're in a place where you're hiring. Now you have to really relinquish that control, train, and then let it go. Let the people do the job and have the responsibilities that they need. So as we've been talking, I think we've found ways to somewhat identify some of the stress and the pieces that bring us there. It's interesting because I think we all deal with this work-life balance in our lives, and I always hear about balance. So the question becomes, is it work that's causing the imbalance, or is it my life that's causing the imbalance? And so I'm going to ask you, how do we begin down that journey? Even though we may be stressed, we want to get to this balanced place, we want to flourish. What are some tips that we can begin to implement today that will allow for us to start to have that balance and move in
Mhm.
that direction?
Yeah, so thank you, Randy. And there is this notion of balance. I really like to think about it as a harmony because when I think balance, I kind of picture a scale, right? So there's work here and there's life there, and if there's less of this, there's more of that, right? So it's a little more restricted. When we talk about harmony, it's kind of this fluid state that you control. When you dial up this part, you dial down that part, and everything is just works the way you design, how you designed it. So the skills that we discussed today, self-care is definitely that skill because that brings joy, right? So the value of joy, and you start respecting and valuing your unique skills and your talents, and you are giving validation to your desires, right? It's important. Your unique desires are important. It's not just the job that you do, but everything else that you came with. There are all these different parts. The gratitude that we were talking about, when you're intentionally you train yourself to see things that you like instead of things that you don't like. The balance, not the balance, the boundaries, the relinquishing of control. Is this my business, not my business? Receiving help. These are the skills. These are the skills that actually elevate your state to that state of flourishing. And you start looking at all these different components of flourishing. Income is very important. Financial stability is very important. But there are other things there as well. Relationship is very important. Your purpose is very important. That sense of harmony is important. All these different elements, your health and vitality is important, right? So that's the harmony part. It's not just work and life, your
Right.
whole being, and your whole being with all these different parts. And that's how you start design that. But what I want to tell you, and that's my experience, and this is really on the level of miracles, once you start practicing these skills, you will actually see changes almost immediately. You start putting joy into your life. You start being grateful for what you have, what you like. You start relinquishing that unnecessary control. You actually will see miracles right away. And the most interesting part in that miracles is that
Hmm.
people start mirroring that. So around you, you're actually getting you will be surrounded, you will be bathing in
Hmm.
gratitude that people will return back to you. You will be bathing in that joy. You actually elevate everything around you. So that's how we start changes, and that's how your changes, your internal changes, change your external circumstance.
I love it. And I talk about this all the time as I'm sharing, as we talk about produce on purpose, is that these external items that we have in life, they're there, but we have the ability to allow that internal to be able to flow outward. Sounds like you've given us some really cool tips. Gratitude, making sure that we are intentionally being joyful, and really you hit on it. I'll give you a moment to talk about it. How does purpose fit within this, and understanding your purpose fit within this construct that we're talking about on a daily basis of having that joy, having that place of gratitude? How does that fit? And you talked a little bit about value, but does value fit
Hmm.
within that purpose conversation?
Yeah, so I think you probably can talk more about purpose than I can talk about purpose, since the whole your whole work is really about producing on purpose, right? Um, so where in my view, where it fits is when you ask the question why, right? So my purpose could be different from yours, but it's really driven by that by why question. Um, for better or worse, again, this is just the way of the world. We're being bombarded since the early ages of what we should be, what we should do, what's important, what's not important, by society, by parents, by schooling, everything, to the point when you don't hear your true authentic voice anymore, right? But
Hmm.
it's there. It didn't go away. You just didn't give it a voice. You kind of stopped listening and asking why. It's like, I want to have this, new latest car. Why? Well,
Right.
because it's fast. Why? And you
Hmm.
go and go, go until you actually hit something that's real. So when you hit something that real, that's your value, and that probably will translate into purpose. So what's good about this again, is this enormous sense of empowerment there, because you control that, right? So you know that it's yours and nobody else's. So I want that car not because somebody, when I was 10 years old, somebody said that only cool guys have these cool cars. But I know this is for a real reason, authentic reason.
Mm-hmm.
And likely with that, you won't have that, you won't want that car anymore, but you want something else. But once you hit that why that's authentic to you, that translates into purpose, so then you actually, it's not something that you want to do, but it's something that you must do, right? So that's
Right.
becoming
Yeah.
that driven factor. Like, this is something you must do because nobody else can do that. And I want to help the world. So I want to share that. And it's a huge, great motivating factor, and that really contributes is that sense of flourishing. So I'm doing something important.
Awesome. And Victoria, I really have enjoyed this conversation. And so I'm going to ask this question I love to ask, that if you would share 3 tips that you would provide to the audience of the items that they should go ahead and utilize that you've done over your entire life that you've figured out. I think these are treasures that you feel that everyone should know about. What would those be?
Mhm. So I'll give one tip because I really it was a page turner for me around the around the self-care, right? So I was in this really deep state of burnout, unmotivated, really did not want to go to work anymore. It's just really questioning, so what is this for? I checked all the boxes. I did everything that everybody ever asked of me. So what? Why am
Hmm.
I still not happy? And somebody suggested this exercise about self-care. So the exercise is you put together a list of 20 things that you like to do. Again,
Hmm.
not because somebody told you that they're useful, not because, they'll make you thinner or, healthier or anything, not because they bring you money, none of that. Just because you like doing them. It could be silly
Right.
things.
Hmm.
But just do that. Let me tell you my experience. When I tried to put a list of 20 of those together, it took me 2 weeks to complete. 2 weeks. I stopped in number 3 and I looked
Hmm.
around and said, oh, I don't remember anymore what I like. I
Oh, wow.
truly have no idea. I forgot.
Yeah, yeah.
So it took me 2 weeks. I actually had to go back, way back. It's like, what did I like when I was 7 years old? To dance. I like to sing. I like to run. I
Yeah.
like all those things. What did I like when I was 16? What did I like before I had kids? So I actually had to go down the memory lane and push those out of myself. Like, oh, I really like to play tennis. I remember. So
Yeah.
it took me 2 weeks to complete. So it will be a very powerful experience if you do that and you put together a list of those 20. Do your best. Just things that bring you joy, and then take 3 of those and put them on the calendar every day for the next week. You'll
Awesome.
go back. You'll go back a week from now, and you see, wow, that really changed my life.
That's awesome. I appreciate that tip. And everyone take a look at that and put down those 20 items. I'm gonna do that too. I'm gonna take that challenge and hopefully share that with others that I know to take that challenge, put it down. What brings us joy? Victoria, how can we find you and how can people connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Victoria Mensch. You can find all the presentations that I do, all the content. If you want to chat about the burnout, how to get out of the burnout or languishing, and the tools and the ways and retreats that we do and the programs that we have, you can book an appointment through LinkedIn as well. I'm very happy to connect with anyone who would reach out on those topics.
Victoria, thank you so much for being a part and sharing. You shared a wealth of information, helping us with stress, helping us to understand burnout, helping us to move from that place that we call burnout to languishing, and hopefully you're at the floor of flourishing. I really enjoyed all of our conversation, and good luck to you and all that you continue to do, and I appreciate it. Thanks everyone, and everyone continue to produce on purpose.